My name is Ron Pederson, and I've known Miriam for 57 years. We met when we were 18 years old and dated for a few years. Got married right after I got back from Vietnam. And been married 52 years. Our marriage was a collaboration, really, but when Miriam first wrote a poem, kind of in response to one of my sculptures, we all of a sudden got the idea about collaborating, that it was kind of a give and take, almost like a conversation. We always thought about things in a conversational way, and that just upped our marriage. It made our marriage so much richer, because since 1989 until 2019, when we did our last collaborative show out at Lowell, we mostly had conversations, with my sculpture and her poetry. And so sometimes I might start a sculpture in response to her poem, and then she would see what I had done, and then she might adjust the poem, and then I might adjust the sculpture kind of accordingly. And it would usually be sort of a back and forth for, 5 conversations before we would get it done, But so we shared, our method was basically to share the beginnings of everything we were doing and see where that led. And it's sort of like the reason we thought about it as a conversation was that the idea of a conversation is when you start the conversation, you don't know where it's going, and hopefully, if it's a good conversation, it'll take both people who are conversing to new thoughts and new considerations that they didn't anticipate when the conversation started. And that's what happened. And that is sort of like life, it reflects life, and a lot of her poetry does reflect life. So I think we've done more exhibits than this, but we've done 11 collaborations over those years. I think it works out to 30 years that we were collaborating. She workshopped, if that's the right word, with many other poets. And she started, I think, with, she was in a group that included Bob Vander Molen. In fact, I think early on, she actually took some classes from Bob when he was offering them. This is when we first moved to Grand Rapids, and she was she was an active poet in Minneapolis and known in poetry circles there. When she got here, she wasn't known. She came with me when I got my job at Calvin, and so she very quickly got connected with Jim Allen and Bob Vander Molen and kind of got into a group there. And then I think she got connected there by signing up for a class with Bob that he just taught out of his home, I think. So Bob and his wife had been friends for, all these years since 1977. And then Miriam started doing poetry in the schools because she had 6 years of teaching high school and junior high school in Minnesota before I moved here. And so she got grants from Michigan Council for the Arts, I think, or one of those, grants that allowed her to go to schools all over, especially West Michigan. She told about how once she was doing a poetry in the school thing up in Norland, Michigan, which was a school that had been established for the Native American community up there. And she was so afraid because she was trying to teach them and they wouldn't look at her. They were looking down and all that. And then she finally gave them an assignment, and they wrote the most beautiful poems. They had been listening, the whole time. Later she found out that it's in their culture, it was not polite to stare an adult or picture or, in the eyes. It was a sign of disrespect. And so they were all looking down. And Miriam, that might have been Miriam's favorite experience, but she drove all over the west of Michigan to do that. And then she also did a series of, she went to 33 nursing homes, I think, and taught people about writing their life story, and gave them questions that they could use. And so just, that's her kind of as a teacher, you know. And while she was doing all that, she was going to graduate school kind of concurrently with Rod Torreson. And so they would drive down together at Western Michigan, where they both got their degrees the same year. So they became fast friends because they were riding together all the time. And ways of thinking and ways of being and values, you know. And so they became really good friends, and that extended right up until the fall of 2022, when Miriam just couldn't do it anymore. Aquinas College has a program called the Semester-in-Ireland, and this year is the 50th year reunion, and we were lucky enough to be chosen to be the faculty that would go 5 times. And, you know, we would interview students. The first year we went, each year we only had 23 places. It was for the beds that were in these tourist cottages that were in this little town. And it's a little town called Tully Cross in the west of Ireland. Beautiful, you know, we could see the ocean. I mean, they didn't have many trees. They had shrubs, but not many trees. And so the landscape was so dramatic. And Miriam wrote lots of poems about it in Ireland. And this year, some of our past students, so we had a total of like 120 students or something like that over 5 years. And several of them are going back because it's the 50th. This week they're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the program in Tully Cross. And some of our students called and said that they wanted to sponsor a tree being planted in Miriam's memory with a plaque that included a poem that they asked me to give them a poem. And they said, can you give us the shortest one? Because they were going to put it on a plaque, in a bronze plaque. And so I sent them a poem that was really a perfect, and it's just called We Are Sleeping in Ireland. And I think that's maybe in one of the little chapbooks that you have. There's one chapbook and 3 exhibition catalogs that some people call chapbooks. They're sort of like chapbooks, but she never wanted to call it a chapbook. She just wanted to call it an exhibition catalog. Miriam loved writing. She didn't particularly love the work that's involved in getting published, you know. She did it a couple times, you know, but she was a big fan of other poets. She was a big fan of Linda Nimick Foster and Rod Torreson. And so she was so encouraging to other people, you know. I mean, she did that in her poetic life, but in her life, as you know from attending her funeral yesterday, it was she's just all about other people and supporting other people. And you know, she was on the Grand Rapids Humanities Council for several years, and she was the one who kind of got the council to initiate the Poet Laureate program in Grand Rapids. And she got Rod and Linda. I mean, she nominated Rod and Linda as the first 2. And the words that describe her most accurately would be, she was a selfless lover, you know. She loved everybody.
I'm Pamela Dale Whiting, and I've known Miriam for almost 41 years, both as a friend and writing companion, as mothers whose children were of a similar age. In fact, we first met when we were pregnant for our youngest child. We were colleagues at Aquinas College for over 30 years. During that time, we taught creative writing, humanities, and literature classes together. We collaborated on presentations, poetry workshops, And so that opportunity to work with her so closely with her writing and with her poetry and celebrating those things was just such a gift. When we were younger, we would meet, not weekly, but fairly often. We still had young children, and so we'd meet in coffee houses and the old restaurants. I don't know whether you remember Gaia House and Grapevine. And then as we've gotten older, we've met weekly on either at her kitchen table with a cup of tea in hand and a pencil and our poem with us, or in front of her fireplace and on the porch. During COVID, Ron heated up got a heater system going, and she and I would be bundled up in winter coats, hats pulled down to here, winter gloves, scarves, and sometimes blankets around us so that we could meet together. So for me, Fridays at 1:30 meant Miriam time and poetry time. And unless she was out of town or I was out of town, every Friday we were together. She championed that role of poetry because she firmly believed in its power to make us laugh, to help us see what's there, to appreciate the mundane in life and grieve and heal. And that's what she wanted to do with it. As a person, Miriam was so generous, and those caring qualities were reflected in her teaching and in her relationships with both fellow writers and her teachers and her students. She always had kind words and wise words to offer students or to other writers. And she, at the same time, demanded beautiful work, and she would always ask for more. Can you revise this again? What if you tweak this? Have you thought about a better metaphor to use? Where could you cut to make this poem have more power? And yet it was always intended to give the writer, she always respected the writer's work, and not all poetry faculty do that. I mean, it's a real gift to do that. As a writer, I benefited from that. If a person brought a poem to her that was intensely personal or came from a really deeply rooted place in their hearts, Miriam's words were, "This is a necessary poem." And then she would say, "Can you give me more?" And you wanted to do that because she believed in what you were doing. And I would say she was as gifted at birthing other people's poetry as she was at her own, and she was an incredibly talented poet. I think Miriam celebrated the human spirit in her poems. One of the earlier poems that I want to share was called Woman on a Sled. And this poem is part of the collaborative series that she and Ron did together, her husband, a sculptor. And I think the poem really characterizes the spirit of Miriam, who she was, how she lived her life, and with such courage, with such zest, and with such determination to live fully. And I'll read it now. Woman on a Sled. This is her last ride, the one flat on her belly, face first into the stinging whiteness. She is arching over the rise before the river, where all sleds stop short of the broken ice. After the flat stretch, she hears the runners she whacked so well, crashing over the frozen waves and cheering somewhere up on the hill. She knows the river never freezes over, but she will not drag her feet. I think that describes how Miriam lived her life. I mean, her poetry is evocative, beautiful metaphor, the sustained image. She faced into her illnesses and her death with courage, and that poem reflects that. And I think she calls all of us to do that. Miriam once said to me, when we were talking about writing and its necessity in our life, she said, writing is praying. And I think that would describe her writing process. Miriam wrote about the stuff of life and the stuff that we all needed to have attested to, witnessed, honored, and she helped us see that it was important, that these ordinary details meant something. A beauty of the morning was celebrated in her images of tea and marmalade on toast. It meant getting up on a cold morning was worthwhile. This all was part of what she conveyed to all of us. In her collaborations with Ron's sculptures, you would find more abstract poems, more philosophical, more reflective. But even with those poems, because they were written in response to this visual image, the sculpture, it made it accessible to an audience. So she wanted us to listen, to hear what she had to say, and she made it possible. Poetry was a constant in Miriam's life. Although her practice of poetry was not daily, she is not one of the poets who would say, oh, I get up at 7 and I work until this time and then I take a walk. When an image or a word or a sound intrigued her, she felt called to explore it. And then she was incredibly disciplined about that work. And while her poetry seemed effortless, when you read her poems, it just feels like you're having a conversation sometimes. It's just so natural. She was a dedicated revisionist. I mean, she drafted and edited, and 2 or 3 years there are editing pieces. I'm working on a collection of poems with others, and we find 3 or 4 drafts different times over the years. The first person that read her poems and edited them was her husband. They worked in close connection with each other. One of the ways that you can see how important poetry was to her was the week before she died. We were together and we read some poetry, or I read to her. And one of the last poems we read with each other was Jane Kenyon's poem, Let Evening Come. And that poem, Miriam was very ill and weak. And I watched this smile bloom over her face when she heard the words. And it was because Jane Kenyon was speaking of what it means to accept your dying and to die gracefully. And for Miriam, poetry was a part of that. I'd like to wrap up finally with a poem that Miriam wrote in the very final months of her life. And I think it captures so many of the themes in Miriam's work, but also attests to the woman that she was, and in confronting her own death and having accepted an illness that kept her life more reclusive. And that's a hard thing to do. That's a really hard thing to do when you are Miriam's age. So this poem is called Deliverance. Friends arrive at my door carrying meals. Nourishment and generosity waft through my house. Well wishes nestle around my heart, but it will not lift this severing thing called pain. When I was a child and suffered from earaches, I remember the voice of my mother behind the throb. Oh, sweetheart, she would say softly, and I would sob. Please, Mommy, make it go away. And it did, away from my body, away from my bedroom, away from my life. Now, when my imploring, ever so fervent, falls short of the hearing of the one whose healing garment eludes me, I wrestle with my old belief, here in this place of no deliverance. But like the sheep, lost and pulled from the tangle, or the melody that lifts you out of yourself and sets you down gently at the door of another, I will be salvaged by the chicken casseroles the homemade bread and the fresh tomatoes brought by these holy messengers sent to assure me I am not forsaken. In this poem, Miriam speaks with a mature understanding that suffering cannot always be alleviated, but that suffering can be endured and lived out with grace in the community of others.
My name is Rodney Torreson, and I've known Miriam probably since 1978 or 79. I got to know her through James Allen, or Jim Allen, who was a prominent Grand Rapids poet for some time. And then as the Urban Institute of the Arts on Race Street was starting up, Miriam would lead these workshops there in which we would share our poems. She brought in many poets during her tenure in that position, and I wrote down some of them: Robert Bly, William Stafford, Carolyn Forshey, Judith Minty, Gary Gildner, Paul Zimmer, and Conrad Hilberry, Herb Scott, John Woods. There was probably one every month for several years. Miriam led poetry workshops that would occur every 2 weeks. And I was thinking that these had started in 78, and they opened up to writers in 1980. In fact, to art as well. But some of the poets that were part of that were Jim Allen, me, Miriam, she led them, Mary Vandermeulen, Billy Hoffman, Kim Hediga, Janie Emos, and sometimes Jack Riddle would come over from Grand Haven and join us. And he did this quite frequently. And then Gary Eberly showed up several times, and Ethel Smothers and Barb Saunier. They were prose writers, but they were welcomed as well. The poetry workshops were pretty interesting. Maybe not that different than a lot of them, but what would happen is every week we'd pass out something that we'd worked on during the previous 2 weeks. And the author would read the poem, and Miriam, she would give that hum of affirmation, and then there'd be another long, almost unbearable silence. And we always wanted to fill it, but we didn't want to try to fill it until we had something to say, you know. And Miriam would quite often say something rather general that she could get by saying. But it was always done with a sense of appreciation for the person who had just read the poem. And then what happened next would be the rest of us would have a question or observation. And then Miriam came back with the meat. Some things, she had had time to look over the poem while the rest of us were making comments. So she did something for the poet who had written the poem, and she did something for the rest of us who would be commenting on it. In the early 1980s, we were among the first people in the the MFA program in creative writing at Western. We both had emphasis in poetry, and I know I did, and I believe she did as well. And we would laugh at different times because I'm impaired with directions, and so is she. And she would always get by. I mean, Ron knew it all, but he wasn't there with us, so he couldn't help us. lot of times we had to take another route because there might be work going on the roads, and so we had to figure it out, and we did. And just to show how much Miriam was appreciated even then, I met with the head of the English department, and she said that of all the people that she had known, Miriam was the one who was the most spiritual person. And I never did share this with Miriam, and I don't know why, but I should have. But it lingers. That thought has been lingering now since she passed away in early March. We had poetry workshops with John Woods and Herb Scott. So they were very meaningful, and we learned a lot from them. But I must say that I don't think they were any more beneficial than the ones that that Miriam led at Ray Street Gallery, which was part of the Urban Institute of the Arts. I thought maybe I'd mention her arthritis. Miriam always said that she did not want to be defined by the arthritis, so she'd never bring it up. And we met together over the last probably 7 years at her house, although the last year the meetings were few and far between, but we tried to meet once every month. I learned that even from the beginning, or even when she was in her 30s, she had different stretching exercises that she had to do in the mornings just to get out of bed, because her body would just be kind of frozen in place. And I looked over the emails over the last 7 years or so, and she was suffering almost all that time. And of course, she had the arthritis early on, and she had the foot infection that came back after she had declared that it was gone. And then she had a number of other health problems that kept her in the porch or in the living room. But she wasn't walking around, and she was always combating some physical malady or another. And sometimes I'd have to bring it up first, and then she'd make light of it, even though you knew she was suffering severely. This is one that I shared with my students year in and year out for many years. You should play the violin. Shame on you, my mother would say. You have to practice your violin. And back to the music stand we marched, drawing the bow to make the scale shrill, a mosquito closing in on the ear at night. And so we became a family of violinists, sawing our way toward the bone. When one of us struck home, the others picked up the tempo. When the music said rest, none of us did. Soon notes flew off the clef like birds from wires startled by a change of weather. And I've always loved the lines, a mosquito closing, to make the scale shrill, a mosquito closing in on the ear at night. And there's another line in there too that I love. Here's the last poem that she published. And that was, I had urged her for a couple of years to send out her poems. And she immediately had this one accepted in a journal called Main Street Rag. This was in 2018. It goes like this. Way of the Skunk. Like rare flowers breaking through stone, wild animals persist in this urban landscape. Remind us how survival, unheroic and messy, has a face of our ancestors. The stowaway, the pickpocket, who managed to make way for us to settle here in this comfortable neighborhood and forget who came first to mark the territory. Their scent has permeated the summer, invading our car, our house, our thoughts like a cyber virus. The porch swing lost its welcome in the twilight air. The sense of smell is the last to go as death plucks away our knowledge of this world. It draws us forward into the dark, connects us at last to a family we hadn't recognized as our own.
My name is Linda Nemec Foster. I'm a poet and writer, founder of the Contemporary Writer Series here at Aquinas College. I'm also the first poet laureate of Grand Rapids, and Miriam Pederson had quite a bit to do with that selection. I want to tell everyone how we first met. Even her husband, Ron, didn't know this story until a few minutes ago. In the summer of 1979, I was pregnant. I was living in Detroit, and I heard that there was this famous male poet reading at Fountain Street Church in Grand Rapids. So I got together some of my poetry colleagues in Detroit, and we came down for the day. We didn't spend the night. We just came down, and I had gone to Aquinas, so I knew the area, and I had just gotten my MFA from Goddard College in Vermont, newly minted MFA. So we came down, and we went to Fountain Street Church. I sat in the pew by the aisle, full house, and all I remember is this wonderful woman in a white maternity dress coming up to me. She had blonde hair. She was young, vivacious, pregnant, and she came up to me. She said, "Are you Linda Nemec Foster? Do you live in Detroit? Didn't you just get your MFA? I know about your work. I've read a little bit about it. I'm Miriam Pederson." And we began our friendship that night. And it was just a wonderful meeting with her. And we started corresponding because I was living in Detroit. So we started snail mailing each other. And even when I moved to Big Rapids in 1982, we kept up our correspondence. But then we began poetry workshops via snail mail, which people don't do anymore. And she had enlisted a group, Rodney Torson, myself, Mark Sheehan, Russ Thornburn, herself, Anne Marie Oman, who I never met, but later became my co-author for the Lake Michigan Mermaid years after that. But we had this wonderful group, and every month we would send the leader of the month a poem with our comments from the previous month. And Miriam organized that. So that was my introduction to the West Michigan poetry community, was because of Miriam, doing this. We continue to be in poetry workshops now in person because I moved down to Grand Rapids in '87. And we had a number of workshops throughout the years, quite a few larger ones connected with the UICA, the Urban Institute for Contemporary Arts, mid-sized workshops that were in people's homes, and smaller ones that would meet in coffee houses. And the best, towards the later years, these private poetry salons, just me and Miriam meeting at her house every month with one poem apiece, talking about the poem, talking about its resonance, talking about then our lives that inform the poetry. So it was just a wonderful way to really develop not only as a poet, but as a reader, a close reader of Miriam Pederson's wonderful poetry. Keep in mind, when we first moved to Grand Rapids, Miriam Pederson was the first person to invite me and my family over for dinner. And I want to talk a little bit about our personal relationship from there. My husband, Tony, her husband, Ron, became good friends. Our children played together I talked about Ben when Miriam was pregnant with Ben. Ben and Brian were the same age. They played together. Ellen and my daughter Ellen, her daughter Madeline, were a year apart. I think Madeline is a year or two older, but they played together. We had birthdays, we had sleepovers, we had 4th of July holidays, just with our families together that a lot of people maybe don't know about, but that's how close our personal relationship was. I remember one time, Ron and Ben and Tony and Brian did a canoe rafting experience on the Pere Marquette River near Big Rapids. So it was just a wonder, like I said, very, very many great memories. And in 1988, when I had been here like a little over a year, Miriam asked me to be more closely involved with the UICA, the Urban Institute for Contemporary Arts, not only as a board member, but as the chair of the literature committee, which she had chaired for many years. So there were more workshops, more readings. As a matter of fact, Miriam gave me my first poetry reading when I moved to Grand Rapids. So not only the first dinner, first poetry reading, and that was in the fall of 1987. I presented my first chapbook, A History of the Body, which was at the Ray Street Gallery. It was a multidisciplinary program that included an art exhibit, the chapbook's illustrator, Kathleen Vandemark, who is very impressed with Miriam's organization and her curating for that show. And in 1989, Miriam also invited me to read with Dan Gerber at Ray Street, like my first, major reading with a major poet. And so there was a wonderful affirmation of my poetry and my literary work because of Miriam from the get-go when I moved to Grand Rapids. We traveled to writers' conferences and festivals together in Michigan where we gave poetry readings and shared hotel rooms. In Detroit, we shared a room at the Pontchartrain after our featured reading there. In St. Clair, Michigan, we were at the Michigan Poetry Festival, and in various venues in Western Michigan, Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids, when we read together on the docket. We run the program together for libraries and workshops. And again, it was a wonderful bond that we had. In 1995, when my husband and I established the Contemporary Writers Series at Aquinas College, Miriam was on the basement floor for that. She was on the first floor at the very beginning, even before the very beginning, even before we had our first event in the fall of 1997. Miriam was on the committee from 95 when we started planning all the way until her retirement at Aquinas. She was on that programming committee. And our first reader in the fall of 1997 was Marilyn Nelson. That first year we had Marilyn Nelson, Lee Young Lee, Stephen Dunn, Naomi Shiabnai, and it went on from there. And Miriam was at the very beginning, even before the beginning of that series. And when we had Seamus Heaney in May of 2006, Heaney told me this is one of the best reading series in the United States that he was aware of. And Miriam was a part of that success. She was also instrumental in my being selected as the first poet laureate of Grand Rapids. I mentioned that a little bit at the beginning of my talk, but Miriam nominated me and was my strongest advocate on the Humanities Council Board. It was an honor for me to be selected as the first one, and I was so grateful for her unwavering support and belief in me. She also had me visit her poetry classes at Aquinas, where I was for many years. Every semester she would have me in as her guest lecturer on multiple occasions, so I could see what a gifted teacher she was in the classroom. So this was another wonderful view of Miriam, not only as a friend and poetry colleague, but as a teacher. I could see her in the classroom over many visits, over many semesters, many years, and how gracious and generous of a teacher she was in the classroom. She was also instrumental in my first, Tony, my husband, and our first trip to Ireland. And here's the story. So before we went to Ireland, in June of 2008, we were in Krakow, Poland for a wedding. One of my cousin's daughters, Marta, was getting married. And as we're coming out of the church and walking to the reception, a woman with a very thick Irish accent comes up to me and says, "Are you the relatives from the States? Are you the relatives from America? And I said, yes. I'm Linda Nemec Foster, Tony Foster. We're, from America. Where? Michigan? Well, we're in Michigan. And usually when you say Michigan, people only know Detroit, maybe Ann Arbor. I said, well, it's Grand Rapids. And I put my hand up and I said, it's over here. She says, wait a minute. Do you know Aquinas College? In the middle of Krakow, this Irish woman asked me, I said, yeah, I went there. My husband went there. How do you know about Aquinas? Well, she said, I was born in Tully Cross, where the Aquinas College Ireland semester abroad is, in Tully Cross. She said, I remember being a young teenager going to see the Aquinas men because they were so handsome every January when they came into town. And so what happened was she stayed with us. Well, she didn't stay with us. Well, yes, she did. During the reception, she sat with us. And this is a poem, a prose poem from my new book, Bone Country. Miriam helped me draft this piece. And this is about this woman that Miriam later met. This is called The Irish Guest at the Wedding in Krakow. She is loud, loves to drink and smoke, and she's living in sin with a man from Gdansk, a man who should know better, according to his mother, the quiet woman with swollen legs. But what can she do? She's no match for the Irish mouth who speaks broken Polish perfectly. This mouth confronts me about my life and realizes I have a husband who's a doctor. Well, aren't you the lucky one? And does he give free medical advice for this? At that exact moment, when the band just finished playing an oberek, a fast waltz, the Irish guest lifts up her dress to expose a long scar from her last C-section. See this? She shows my husband, shocked into silence. What can you do about this? She whispers as she fingers the deep white line, a road map from Galway to Krakow, and describes every step. From yellow gorse to Mazovian willows, green cliffs to Baltic shore, from her dead mother to her dead son. It's the poem Miriam helped me draft. So that is June of 2008. Flash forward to January of 2009, I get an email from Miriam. She's in Tully Cross. She's in Ireland. She says, Linda, do you know this woman who claims she's living with one of your cousins in Galway? And this is what this woman did. Lorraine Wallace, when she knew the Aquinas people were coming back in January, she visited, her mother and father and came to the cottages, found out where the faculty was, knocked on Miriam and Ron's door and said, do you know Linda Nemec Foster and Tony Foster from Grand Rapids? Yeah, we know them. Well, we got to get them here to Ireland. So after how many times Ron and Miriam had been to Ireland before, they always invited us. We never had the opportunity to go. Miriam kept on emailing me. She says, Linda, she won't leave me alone. I'm thinking, if I remember this woman from the wedding, yeah, she's got some spirit. So at any rate, we did go in the end of April of 2009. We visited them for about a week and a half, Ron and Miriam. We stayed at a little hotel right across from the cottages. And we got together with Lorraine and my poor, long-suffering cousin Maj. And Ron and Miriam really liked Maj, but Lorraine got drunk again. And I remember we were at dinner, we came back to the cottages in Tully Cross at Ron and Miriam's cottage, and she was going crazy. And I remember Miriam took me to the kitchen and said, how can we get this woman off our husbands? How can we get this crazy woman off Ron and Tony? So we devised a plan to take her outside to drink more, with a bottle of wine. But that was a bonding experience, because even when I mentioned to Ron about Lorraine Wallace, I mentioned her to Ron yesterday after the service, and it all came back to him. So talk about bonding. So that's what happened there. So going back to the personal, her interest and affection for my family, Miriam organized my daughter-in-law's bridal shower. She organized my daughter-in-law's baby shower, both events. And I'm thinking of the many, many dinners with our families, the movie double dates that Ron and Miriam and Tony and I shared. Seeing a movie together, then going to our houses. We take turns for dessert, coffee, wine, beer, as we discussed the movie, how it reflected what we thought about our lives, sometimes our marriages, our relationships. And I supported Miriam's poetry. I was honored when she asked me to blurb her first poetry collection, her chapbook, This Brief Light, published by Finishing Line Press in 2003. And when I read you what I wrote about Miriam's work. Miriam Pederson's poems are filled with pure, unadorned grace, and honest, clear-eyed wisdom. With a simple yet elegant style, she takes life's ordinary moments and weaves them into luminescent images that have a haunting familiarity. In essence, she gives us our lives. Her language is natural and perfectly paced as it embraces joy and sorrow with equal and delicate measure. What a gift Miriam Pederson gives to us in these poems that seem to hold entire universes in their quiet hands. That's Miriam's work. I could go on and on, relating so many other examples of how Miriam's poetry and my life nurtured and supported each other. Not only our professional lives as poets and writers and teachers, but our personal lives as daughters, wives, mothers, and friends. I love her. I miss her. And just how we nurtured and supported each other through our lives and through our work. Over the course of our friendship with the Pedersons, Tony and I have collected several of Ron's art pieces. We also purchased one of Ron and Miriam's collaborations, and I'll show this wonderful red clay sculpture that Ron did. And he described to me it is red clay that was painted. And it's a red clay sculpture and the corresponding poetry broadside. And this is what graces our house, along with several other of Ron's pieces. But this is the poem, the poetry broadside, that also was a part of this exhibit. And I'm so glad that we purchased this together and have this in our home. So I'd like to read this poem to you as I conclude. And it's a poem that her son, Ben, read yesterday at the memorial for his mom. What is our deepest desire? To be held this way in our mother's arms, to be nestled deep in the warmth of her body, her gaze, to be adored, to overwhelm her with our sweetness. This is what we seek in chocolate, in the food and drink and drugs that stun the senses, that fill the veins with the rich cream of well-being. What we take for lust, can it be perhaps a heavy pang of longing to be swaddled close to the heartbeat of our mother? No bucket seats, jacuzzi, or even a lover's embrace can duplicate this luxuriance, this centered place on the roiling planet. When the old woman, now small and light, can be carried in the arms of her son, he at first holds her tentatively, a foreign doll. But gradually, as the pool loses its ripples, he sees his face in hers and draws her to him, rocking to the rhythm of her breathing. This is the way to enter and leave the world. And I'll just end by saying, when I first met Miriam in the summer of 1979, I can't remember that famous poet that we came to see. It could be Shakespeare, it could be Ginsberg. I don't remember that famous poet, but I remember Miriam with her white maternity dress and her blonde hair. We were young, we were alive, and we were both with life.
My name is Gary Eberly. I am a professor emeritus of English at Aquinas College, and Miriam was a colleague and friend of mine for over 40 years. I first saw her back in the 1980s when she and I were new faculty here at Aquinas. I think at that time we were both part-time. And I remember walking down the hall from my office and seeing this woman that I didn't know talking about poetry. And I said, well, that's odd. I don't remember her from any English department meetings. And it turns out she had just been hired as an adjunct. We first met socially, I think, at a party for faculty at Aquinas that was hosted at her house back in when she lived on Washington Street, in a house that was filled with artists and singers and directors. And then we ended up together on the board of the Urban Institute of Contemporary Arts. And it was there that, as writing colleagues, we were part of a writing group that met regularly at the Urban Institute for Contemporary Arts. We also became part of a round-robin writing circle where we would share works in progress with people, writers around the state, mostly poets. I was writing poetry, but also mainly interested in fiction. And we had writers in, I think, Kalamazoo, Detroit, and a number of us here in Grand Rapids. And every month we would each produce a work, put it out there for the others to critique, and then, and this was in the days before internet, so it was all literally Xeroxed copy stuff. At the Urban Institute at UICA, we took part in sometime in the mid-'80s with a crazy reconstruction of a 1960s happening that was put together by a poet named Jerome Rothenberg. And at that gathering, we had musicians and Rothenberg, who came in with this big wizard staff, and he was kind of the spiritual hippie director of this thing. And most of us were old enough to either have been hippies or to remember them. And so we just had a blast with people coming up and just reciting poetry, then spontaneously dancing. And Miriam was either an organizer or at the center of that somehow. And after that, then I kind of split from that group as I got into more nonfiction writing, and the poets went their way. But we kept in touch, and we would appear at readings together through the 80s and 90s. Eventually, I'll talk more here about Miriam's effect on younger poets, because as I discovered as a colleague, and then also eventually as the department chair of the English department, and then having my office just a few feet away, a few doors down from Miriam's, she had an extraordinary gift for bringing out talent in her students, in young people. She had, I thought, infinite patience, much more than I would have. Reading poetry that was really raw, let's say, and then patiently working with the students, not to rewrite their stuff, but to help them find precisely what they wanted to say. And that precision in her own work and in the work of her students led her to produce, and her students to produce poetry that was very sensitive, very clear, that maximized the use of language in the way that her own work did, I think. But not that they were copying her. They found their own voices. She encouraged, she listened, she created in her office a space that was comfortable with a little tablecloth on the table and candies out and the whole thing, and would give these students these very excellent prompts for their work. She and I and a number of other writers from the department, like Vicki McMillan and Brent Chesley, organized several years in a row high school writing conferences in early summer called Extending the Writer's Craft. And then after several years of that in the 90s, Poetry Out Loud, which focused on students and developing their ability to write poetry and then perform it. Because most poets today are not read, they're heard. And we gave the kids a few lessons on how to walk into a room, into a situation, and read your own poetry out loud. That was a very successful workshop. she continued to write. My wife and I stayed in touch with Miriam and Ron over the past few years as she progressively declined. She continued to write. I haven't seen any of that material, but she worked with some of her close friends on poetry, I think, until the very end, and I hope some of them will talk about that. She was a kind, sensitive person, and her poetry, and I'm going to take an opportunity here to read one. What I liked, Miriam was tall and thin, and her poems tend to be thin on the page. That is to say, her lines are not long, they're not sloppy, they're confined and pretty columnar. That is, they're in a narrow column. And there's an almost Zen-like simplicity to the insights that she has. I would call her a poem of ordinary moments that she makes extraordinary by her writing. She must have paid attention in a way that most of us can't to everyday things, and maybe had that in common with an Emily Dickinson, who took this. Miriam's world was much larger than hers, but who took the world around her and converted it into very precise, powerful imageries by selecting out the details. So one of the poems I like most is called Braids. And Braids is about one of those everyday activities. I'm sure this one is from her own childhood. And then as Madeline grew, she also wrote poems that included her daughter and her role as mother. In it, she has two sections. The first section very minutely describes what it feels like to have your hair braided, which an experience I've never had and never will with my hair. But then it becomes a lesson in the second half, a lesson in how to be the person braided. And I thought that was so perfect in her role as a teacher. And the final section, and the final 8 or 9 lines, gives almost a portrait of how Miriam went through the world. So I'm assuming in this first line, the her is her mother, and the daughter is Miriam herself at a young age. Her hands separate the strands of her daughter's hair, feeling in its texture her own childhood summers. The coolness on her neck as she ran along the beach, her braids striking the air. Every day, a grand expectation, a leaf unfolding before her eyes, its veins spreading in all directions. At bedtime, her mother released her braids, brushed her hair, and praised its fullness, its shining light. When your mother braids your hair, you must sit very still. You will notice things you had not before, a crack in the wall, the shape of a teapot, a scuff mark on your shoe, the quiet breathing of your mother as she weaves your hair into countless indelible summers.
My name's Amy Dunham-Strand, and I know Miriam through teaching at Aquinas College. I started teaching classes in Humanities and Inquiry and Expression, where Miriam also taught. Miriam came from the English department. One of her many gifts was cultivating, of course, poetry community formally through all the things that everyone else has been talking about, but also informally. And so I really came to know Miriam more and more over the years, becoming part of an informal kind of poetry friends group. And I don't know how I was so lucky to become part of this group, because we met once a month on a Sunday evening just to talk about poetry. And it was Miriam and artists Dana Freeman and Joyce Recker and writer Mara Naselli and myself. And it was really a group centered not on writing poetry, but on reading poetry and cherishing language and just paying attention to language. And we started off by just bringing poems initially that spoke to us, you know, and to our lives and where we were. And we'd read those aloud and then talk about the craft of the poem and what we noticed about it. Then as the group evolved, we'd sometimes linger for a more extended time on a particular poet or a chapbook or a collection or a form. I remember lingering on Elizabeth Bishop and Emily Dickinson and Wallace Stevens and W.S. Merwin and Louise Glick and Linda Paston, you know. But it was all very organic and spiritually very life-giving. We read all kinds of poems, old and new and classic and contemporary from all over the world. And Miriam always knew something about the poet's life or about a particular reading that the poet did or the form or the collection that lent depth and insight to our discussion. And I think she was always really drawn to the musicality of poetry. You know, she said it was closest to music and appreciated, even required that in a poem. And I think she also appreciated, I remember a phrase she used once, poems of heft, you know, poems that had depth. And showed how difficult that it was to really see the world and all of its painful beauty. I think Ron and Miriam fondly called us the poetry gals, but there were lots of names. It was very fluid. Poetry circle, poetry sisters, poetry salon, poetry friends, poetry pals, poetry group. You know, it was very casual and personal. And so anyway, it was through that group that I think I came to know Miriam more intimately as a poet and a friend, and have come to see myself as a student and lover of poetry. Someone asked me if I was a student of Miriam's, and I was never a student in any formal capacity, but I certainly feel that in an informal capacity and appreciate it. And it's this group that's putting together a collection of her works with Ron and Ben and Madeline and Pamela Dale Whiting to hopefully come out this fall through Schuler's Chapbook Press. So we're working on that collection. And just a labor of love and joy to understand her work as such a brilliant, brilliant poet. But someone who also just really, I think she avoided self-promotion as a poet too. So I guess in my relationship to Miriam, what I would sort of testify to is her ability to find poetry in people and in relationships. And I think for her, people also were poetry. And I think our little poetry group is a kind of testament to that, that informal finding of poetry in life and in friendship. I remember floating. I love this because Madeline read it. I love this because it also is one of my personal favorites and recalls my experience of floating as a child. But I think even more importantly, it underscores a kind of spiritual buoyancy that Miriam saw in all of us. So this is Miriam's poem, I Remember Floating. Lying on the water, my body allowing its small downward pull until a flutter of my arms and feet steadied me. Come swim, I heard them call from somewhere, but I was elsewhere, a dreamy girl watching the heavens through closed eyelids, oblivious and out of range, disillusionment yet to find its way into my heart or illness into my body. I trusted water to keep me afloat, like the hands of my mother who made me believe, as I do now, that buoyancy lives in me and in all of us, no matter how far we are from shore. Another poem is a favorite of mine, and I think my English department colleagues shared this with one another at Aquinas here after she died. And I think it reflects how a lot of the subject matter of Miriam's poems comes from her life and from her experience as a woman, as a daughter and a sister and a mother and a professor, a parent, a traveler and a friend. And so this one, I think, speaks to a position of a midlife woman. It's entitled Mother's Newly Gone. It's in her chapbook, This Brief Light. Mother's newly gone. Our mothers are leaving us. One by one, they flutter through the door as if we had expected it, as if we had prepared for this goodbye. We can hardly follow their recipes, their remedies for flu, for heartache, are somewhere in the cupboard. The names of relatives to be invited are mixed in with the old green stamps. How can we, their busy daughters, sew on patches to make things last? What are we to do with these old compacts, these letters, cards, and cold creams? How will we behave without their disapproving frowns, their "listen, honey," their "oh, sweetheart"? We're standing up straight, we're being kind, and we've sent off the thank you notes, but they are minding other business beyond the blue, leaving us in middle age to sift through their precious lives for clues to who we are. I love that poem. It was really foresighted in a lot of ways. She left us a lot of clues for how to live, though, and to live with openness and grace, and with a curiosity both for life and for death. How to be the woman on the sled who will not drag her feet. I'm going to end with a poem that our poetry group members, we have a lot of favorites, but this is another favorite that I think celebrates just the love of language and books and the way that words become a part of you and become you. And this one, I think it just uplifts the work of our little poetry group to cherish language. And this is called A Petition for Good Books. Let them be your noontime sandwich, nourishing, spicy, buttered with desire. Let them line your walls and fill your arms and tumble from your bedside table. Let their magnetic power draw the viewer from the frantic screen and toward the shady maple. Let the office visit and the traffic jam be sweetened by their dialogue, their stunning metaphor. Let the margins be peppered with wows and yeses. Let highlighters set their best passages on fire. Let them teach you good posture as you balance them to bed and then become your lullaby, your final waking song. Let their words become a lovely web connecting you to early scribes, illuminating sacred texts in gorgeous filigree. Let their texture become familiar as skin, a shedding, a new leaf. And when the final book is ended, let the pages ease from their bindings, soar, buoyed by the miracle of language, and stir the sky like autumn birds. I'd like to think that sort of at the end of that poem, maybe Miriam is releasing her own life or the life of a poet or a writer, from the pages of life's book, right?
David Cope, I knew Miriam for quite some time before I actually got to know her well. That was when she sent me Poems from Ireland in 2013 for my Song of the Awashtenong, Grand Rapids Poetry in the 21st Century. She was one of the people in that anthology. So I turned to those Irish poems to try to find my way back to her. And it's been quite a journey. I've spent 2 weeks really researching in depth. And I was pleased to learn that the landscapes of her poetry are feminine or female. And that the poems themselves tend to inhabit that liminal space between certainties. The men tend to have certainties about them, and of course they're always wrong. But so I'm going to read 4 poems and stop now and then to explain a few things. I also need to give a little background sometimes. So the first one is Burin, which is a limestone landscape in County Clare in southwest Ireland. On the west coast is the Atlantic. So the Burin is right there. And it's a place that looks parched. It looks dead. And I'll go from there. Under the parched face of the Burin, rivers flow in caves and swallow holes. Surface limestone slabs and puzzle patterns of a dry riverbed breathes the unseen living water. In spring, the botanist crouches in this broken world, seeking the alpine flora. Brilliant saxifrage, delicate gentian taking a stubborn root in any crevice holding a smidgen of soil. She walks the lunar landscape. This is the botanist. She walks the lunar landscape past portal dolmens, signs of Neolithic farmers who tilled this tableland, her eyes trained on the dark, crooked spaces where impossible life has found a way. Portal dolmens, mysterious rock formations which are thought to contain the spirits of the ancestors. They had a picture of one where there were skeletons down there. So it's an odd poem because it's dealing with a landscape that looks like it's dead, that appears to be parched, and yet she finds life in it. And she is the botanist who is finding it, if that makes sense. Second one, someone was telling me Sheila Nagik, which is a fertility figure who grasps her own exaggerated vulva and pulls it apart, who apparently is on the exterior of a Catholic church somewhere in Ireland, which I thought was an odd thing to be there. But Stathach is the shadowy one, a fearsome warrior woman in Scottish and Irish lore. She lives on the Isle of Skye, which is in Scotland. She is the one who trained Cuchulainn, the great Irish warrior, sometimes deemed a demigod in their myth. Yeats had a poem about him. Well, we'll get to the sorrowful adornments later. So this is Island Women. Laugh of Sheila Nagik, wildness unleashed in the hummocks. Woman whose name is Ireland. Your sons die for the land, your daughters remain invisible. But the ancient mouths of island women tell me who you really are. Skathach on the Isle of Skye. It was she who trained Cuchulainn, who sought her, learned from her the skills that made him known. She is the warrior difficult to reach, whose island defies the faint-hearted, the acceptance of trouble. She is the one who watches over the waters from there and there, choosing those deserving of her wisdom, dispensing her favor in the flashing light. She is the island woman I have come to know despite the sorrowful adornments she has been made to wear, the shawl, the keen, the figure bent in prayer. This woman laughs and sings and ranges through these hills she knows are hers. Come look her in the eye. The sorrowful adornments are the shawl, the ritual shawl that women wear for a funeral. The keen, the vocal lament, keening, the hour of keening come. And bent in prayer, obviously, is beseeching the Lord's help. So it's interesting to me how this mythological thing is also something having to do with Miriam's perception of the land itself and of the people on it, and that the island women are the ones who contain the truths that need to be learned. If that makes sense. Patty Coins, which is the only one that's not a poem that's caught up in big words. Poem means a lot to me because my niece founded an Irish step dancing school here in town, and they have won national awards for their dances. She trains young girls mostly. There's a few boys. Patty Coins. Old women step dancing at Patty Coins pub glow back in their youth. Somewhere along the stem of their lives, their men stopped watching the twirling skirts, the high kick in time to tin whistle and drum, and instead gazed deeply into the frothy glass. The women's hands join together, their bodies weave the remarkable space they have created. Their eyes shine into one another's as they begin to spin, hair flying, feet drumming, the room a dazzle of long-living women embracing and holding on. So the men got drunk, the women kept living. Anyways, and then the last one, which is, this is a hard one that had 3 different variations on the pronunciation. So Muiri, it's spelled Mawiria, but it's Muiri, I guess. There were 3 different variations. A mountain name to move the lips. In the tangle of morning, coffee steaming the window, the heft of her glows through. Sometimes a schmaltzy postcard, backlit, hallelujahs bouncing off her snowy ridges. Sometimes a hazy memory fingering its way upward into the conscious afternoon. When the newspaper read, the sandwich is eaten, Muira speaks in a solemn pulpit voice, something of comfort and of warning. Before a storm off the Atlantic, Muira smokes. Dark wisps circle and glower, hiding then revealing her mountain bones. Nearly transparent at dusk, she seems to slip northward in her gauzy shroud and vanishes. In the rare hours, Muira projects onto the sky in perfect focus. Her ridges now seams of an old coat. Cloud shadows sweep across her worn fabric, clarifying her textures, gentle her curves. For many days I have watched her shedding disguises like a fugitive. Now, in the night, Muira makes herself known by blocking out the stars on the horizon, a formation suggesting a hand sheltering the eyes, a hand holding steady in the baffling splash of Irish light. So real quick on this one, you're following the mountain through its day from dawn to midnight, showing many different sides of the same thing, and it's a woman. The mountain is a woman. So it carries up that same idea. And I walked away from my study on this and I thought, Miriam, I never knew you when, and I do now. But she was one of those people that was so gentle and so kind to everyone I ever met that remains the primary thing of my memory of her. Plus, she's a damn good poet.
My name is Kim Weingarten. I first met Miriam in the mid-1980s. She was working on her MFA in creative writing at Western, and I was completing my BA in English. We lived in Grand Rapids and shared rides back and forth to Kalamazoo. I was so young, and Miriam was so wise, complex, kind, full of grace and often mischief. We swapped stories in the car, recited favorite lines from poems, and reprogrammed together after our classes. Miriam introduced me to the poetry of William Stafford, Mary Oliver, Stanley Kunitz, among others. The poem, The Layers by Kunitz, the meaning and intent contained in the closing lines, quote, "Live in the layers, not on the litter," shaped the content and tenor of so many of our conversations over the years. Miriam taught me to be open to mystery, the complexity and light in our spiritual world. Miriam became a mentor after I received my BA and MFA and went on to teach. She was trustworthy, never competitive, never self-promoting. She was consistent. Her compassion for and devotion to her own students, her dedication to her discipline, and willingness to share some of her own strategies used in the classroom provided me with direction with my own students. Miriam led gracefully by example. We stayed connected over nearly 40 years through emails, an exchange now and again of a book, phone calls, and what came to be a tradition, our summer visits on Miriam and Ron's front porch for happy hour and conversation. Our friend and fellow poet, Barbara Saunier, joined us. Miriam understood and lived by the awareness of how tradition, ritual, and empathy unite us as human beings and give us hope and purpose. In December of 2021, during the upset of COVID, I drove by Miriam and Ron's home just 2 blocks from my own. It was a Saturday, a gray, cold day. Ron was on the front porch putting up Christmas lights, a Christmas tree, and a wreath on the door. I felt such optimism in that scene. A day or 2 later, I emailed Miriam, conveying how hopeful the scene was, how the lights and Christmas tradition would be welcomed by all in the neighborhood. Miriam responded back, quote, "We are indeed strangely hopeful in this season of darkness. Why we are given this gift when the world is in chaos, and we personally are feeling the effects of age and illness is a mystery. Well, I guess mystery is what it is all about." Miriam's hope was grounded in her faith in God, her love for family and friends, and her commitment to community. I would like to close with a poem by Miriam called Given. It was part of tradition each year for Miriam and Ron to send a New Year's card mid-January. She called this their annual project. The cards were a collaboration project displaying a photo of sculpture by Ron and a poem by Miriam, along with a handwritten note. This poem, Given, is from the card sent in January 2018. Given. News today becomes no news tomorrow. Gravity holds us up and lets us down, but light enters day without a glitch, spreading itself evenly on this earth as eyes are opened and bodies rise. What will we do with this common gift, wrapped in heartache and sweetness, delivered without expectation, this thing of uncommon grace?
My name is Ann Keller, and I knew Miriam first as my professor of creative writing. So I took a class with her, and this was after I had completed all my coursework in other schools, and I came back to Grand Rapids to do my education certification courses, and I just took creative writing for fun, even though I'd already had a creative writing major. So the class met on Saturday mornings and was, I think it was every few weeks. It was a directed study class. So so that's where I first met Miriam. I would say she was one of those people who took you under her wing. She was both protective and kind of always encouraging you to put yourself out there and your work out there. And even from that first class, she encouraged me to submit my work to be published. And one of the poems that I wrote in that class was one that I submitted to the Dyer-Ives poetry contest. And I don't remember which place it won, but it did win that year. And I was looking back at that draft and just seeing her comments on, one of the original drafts of the poem. And she helped change the last line of the poem, which, I thought she just was very perceptive about language and how you could make the meaning of words have more impact based on the choice of words that you were using. So I knew her in that way, and then I knew her also as a mentor when I started teaching. And I was just telling the group out in the hall there how even this year I used one of her assignments that she had done in that class with my ninth graders to encourage them to write poetry. And I think I've done that for the 25 years that I've been teaching. Somehow Miriam's lessons have found their way into my lessons. And she's had a profound impact. And then she had a good sense of humor too. There was one time when I had some challenges at school, and she said, well, they're all a bunch of morons, and if you need Ron to come and, take anyone down, we're happy to do that. So she just was level and encouraging and funny, and always took an interest in what I was doing and wanting to help in any way. So she used to walk in my neighborhood too, so I'd see her and Ron. She and Ron would walk down the streets. It's always fun to see her out and about. And one semester I filled in for one of the professors here, and she made sure to make time to have, we went out for dinner, and she just wanted to make sure that I was okay and that I had everything I needed and I was having a good experience. And so, super kind. I'll read her poem. It's called Becoming. And I like this poem a lot because I think it just encompasses what she meant to so many. Becoming. In the folds of each day, someone waits to enter your life, to appear in person or in a dream and change you slightly, as if a pencil sketch were being drawn of you, and a line extended or erased increases your vitality, your presence in the world. Be ready for the entrance of a stranger or a friend who, after an exchange, lingers in the form of words, a look, a gesture, new filaments joining your own, becoming you. So that's by Miriam. I also, too, I guess I'll add, I just love the way that she thought like an artist as well. And since I love doing art, the visual of everything was just really important. And seeing her collaboration with other, with Ron and then with other teachers as well, I think is a real model for how we should, go forward in terms of using the arts to inspire and collaborate and make a community, because I think that's what she did really well.
My name is Sarah Miras. I had the honor and pleasure of being a student of Miriam Pederson's in the 1990s. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to write for a living, and I actually credit her as being very important as a part of that process and my development. She gave me and so many other writers a precious gift, the gift of her time, the gift of hard but gentle constructive criticism. She was very gifted at allowing you to blossom as a writer, but forcing you to grow and to stretch. She helped me understand that the power of observation that I used in my poetry could be used in other ways. For 26 years since I left Aquinas, I've made my living working in the arts, writing, working with visual artists, working with the intersection between language and visual art. And I really do credit that to the classes I took with Miriam and Ron, where they partnered visual arts and poets and really stretched artists to get outside of their self-constructed boxes. But for me, learning to see life as a poem really did allow me to build a career out of writing. I'd love to share one of Miriam's poems. This one is from one of her first chapbooks called The Adding We Do on Our Sleep, and it's called Parting by Miriam Pederson. So simple, underwater, your body slides into space. You open with your hands. But on Earth, the center is hard to find. Even with one eye closed, nothing holds still for the parting. Your reckless child jerks away from your comb. Your lover pulls the blanket from underneath you in the uneven hours of sleep. Middle ground shifts beneath your feet. You fall on the side you tried to avoid, becoming your own shadow. It's another favorite poem of mine by Miriam. It's from another chapbook that she did with Ron called This Brief Light. It's called Vantage. From the corner of my eye, I see you watching me. You pretend you are asleep. Black beard folded into sheets, one paw curled around your shoulder, as if you're cold or modest. I bend to find my shoe, near enough to the bed to assure myself of your attention. For years you spy on me, before the sun. You steal a look, then quickly close your eyes. A great blinking bear, watching me love you from your secret cave. I also wrote a poem for Miriam. Miriam and I spent a lot of time looking over poems in the window at the Cava House, a coffee house very near campus here at Aquinas. The Poetic Litter of Coffee Stains, for Miriam Pederson, who gave the precious gift of her time to so many young poets, by Sarah Miras. Coffee stains dot the poet's litter strewn across the table. The worn wood pedestal strains to hold the weight of the verse, all of it wet with hyperbole and metaphor, each scrap of paper spilling over with the kind of emotion that's simply too raw to exist outside of a poem. The esteemed poet and professor, the young aspiring writer, both seated in the cafe window, heads bent over latte steam and scribbled diatribes. They sort coffee stains for a pearl. Reading, writing, crafting, discussing. The sun moves. Cars whiz by the cava. The latte's empty. And one by one, the words begin to assemble, to transform into something beyond the boundaries of their letters. That, says the professor. That's when you know it's a poem.